Can Scout one-shot a heavy? Should Scout even be able to one-shot a heavy? These are questions that have plagued philosophers for thousands of years. They've just never tested it before because they're too scared of the answer. But I'm not. I'm here to determine the highest possible damage Scout can do in a single hit. There's a lot of factors that determine damage, things like range, crits, mini-crits, damage bonuses and penalties, enemy resistance and vulnerability, etc, etc. And in this video, we're going to find the right combination to see exactly how much or how little damage Scout can do. And the simplest place to start would probably be the scattergun. The scattergun has a base damage of 6 per pellet, fires 10 pellets per shot, and deals up to 75% more damage the closer you are to a target. So if every pellet connects at close range, you should be able to deal up to 105 damage. Or at least on paper you should, cause I was consistently getting 104. I'm not really sure how that works or why that's the case, but it's not that important right now, just forget about that. And then critical hits will deal 3 times the base damage of a weapon, making the max critical damage of the scattergun 180 if all 10 pellets connect. This is some pretty standard stuff that you probably already know, but let's add some more factors to the mix. The weapon that gives you the most standard damage vulnerability is currently the Warrior Spirit, which makes you take 30% more damage just for having it out. Why they thought that was a good idea, I couldn't tell you, but that's how it is. So a critical scattergun shot with all 10 pellets connecting against the heavy with the Warrior Spirit out will do a whopping 234 damage. Well, that's all well and good, but that's still not one-shotting a heavy, so it's basically worthless. However, the Warrior Spirit can combine with a Buffalo Steak Sandwich, which also adds a vulnerability. And yes, the Steak's vulnerability and the Warrior Spirit's vulnerability do stack. This means that a heavy with both of those items in effect, which were part of the same set and meant to pair together, mind you, will take 56% more damage. I'll demonstrate here with the grenade launcher since it has a base damage of 100, and it does go to 156. And this means that a non-crit scattergun shot can deal up to 163 damage to a heavy that's both under the effects of the stake and has the Warrior Spirit active. So that would mean a crit would have to deal 234, which is the exact same crit damage as it was against just the Warrior Spirit. I may have discovered something that not many people are aware of because it's not mentioned anywhere on the wiki as far as I know, but the damage vulnerability of the Buffalo Steak Sandwich is completely ignored if the attack is a crit or a mini crit. Just to give a very clear demonstration here, a quickscope headshot from the sniper rifle should deal 180 damage to a heavy under the stake's effects, but it will still only deal 150. So this is an oddly specific, but actually slightly helpful bug for the Buffalo Steak Sandwich, but it does kind of make it useless for this specific video where we're trying to find Scout's maximum damage because Scout's maximum damage is usually going to be a crit or a mini crit, so it's not really useful here, okay? Alright. And then we gotta go deep. We gotta scroll past the bounds of regular game modes and into the depths of manpower. And then once that's activated, we equip the strength power-up, which straight up doubles your damage. With just that power-up alone, the scattergun can deal up to 209 damage in a single hit. Which would mean that with a crit, it would deal 180. Yeah, another setback. As of November 5th, 2020, the strength power-up no longer multiplies critical damage, which is a bit of a shame. This means that because the scattergun has a higher damage ramp up than most weapons do, with 175% versus the standard 150, you can actually deal more damage with the double damage of the strength power up combined with ramp up than you could with the 3 times base damage of a crit. Are you paying attention? Because there's going to be a quiz on this later. So the strength power up versus a Warrior Spirit heavy can deal up to 272 damage, 1.75 times from ramp up, 2 times from the power up, and 1.3 times from the Warrior Spirit. Still, just barely not enough to one-shot a heavy. But, while the strength power-up doesn't apply to critical damage, it will apply to mini-crits. So a close-range, strength power-up boosted mini-crit from a scattergun versus a Warrior Spirit heavy will do 367 damage. So yes, Scout can one-shot heavy without even needing a full crit, technically. What do we even need snipers for? Interestingly, if you do all the math out, it should actually come up as 368.55 and not 367. Kinda like the 104 damage earlier, I'm not really sure how to explain this. And something similar does actually come into play with all of Scout's primary weapons, where the calculation is always 1 or 2 damage off total. Not really that important overall, but still kinda weird. And that 366 maximum damage applies to the scattergun, but also the soda popper, babyface's blaster, and backscatter, because they all have the same base damage and fire the same number of pellets. The Force of Nature has a slightly lower base damage, but fires more pellets. So put in the exact same situation, with a strength power-up and mini-crits versus a Warrior Spirit Heavy, the Force of Nature can deal up to 396 damage, just barely under 400 damage in a single shot. The Shortstop, in the same scenario, can only deal an unimpressive 252. Pathetic! And as far as secondaries go, the pistol and Pretty Boy's pocket pistol can deal 79 damage, which is enough to kill a heavy in 4 shots, and the Winger can deal 90, also enough to kill a heavy in 4 shots. The Flying Guillotine can deal 176 damage, plus 14 damage per tick of bleed. With 2 ticks per second and a 5-second duration, that's a total of 140 bleed damage. And that's enough to kill a heavy with just 1 Flying Guillotine. And I thought the old Sandman combo was bad. So now we gotta move on to melee weapons. And our heavy melee of choice is now gonna be the Fists of Steel, because they give a 100% melee vulnerability. Now, something that's worth noting is that when manpower mode is enabled, all melee weapons will deal 30% more damage. However, that damage bonus is ignored for critical hits and for power-ups. So in both cases, they will always go off of the melee's original base damage, which means that that bonus is kind of a non-factor here. And then again, as of November 2020, strength and crits don't stack, so for our purposes, the 3 times damage of a crit is going to be better than the 2 times damage of strength. But wait a minute, the knockout power-up exists, and that increases your melee damage by 1.9 times. Not as much as the strength power-up, but it should multiply with crits, right? No, it does not. So it really doesn't matter what power-up you have, cause a crit from the bat will always deal a base damage of 105, and then of course that's doubled with the Fist of Steel to 210. Not a bad damage, but kind of a disappointing outcome. The Sandman and the Candy Cane also do the same damage, and the Boston Basher technically does too, but it also applies the first tick of bleed at the same time, making it 214. The Sun on a Stick deals 158, the Fan of War with 53 whole damage, the Atomizer 179, and the Rap Assassin, well, the funny thing with the Rap Assassin is that the ornament actually has a higher base damage than the Rap Assassin itself. The ornament's base damage is 15, and the melee base damage is 12. But the ornament itself is actually classified as melee damage too, so it will deal double damage to a Fist of Steel Heavy. So the wrapping paper can do a max of 74 damage, and the ornament, well, on paper it should deal 90, but something I just somehow am finally noticing now is that the ornament seems to have a mind of its own when it comes to damage. Not one time while I was recording this did it deal a base damage of 15. It was dealing 37, it was dealing 41, it was doing 25. I had a regular crit do 56, and then I had one do 65. And even if you factor in the bleed damage applying at the same time, none of those numbers come out to be 15. The Sandman Ball always has a base damage of 15. The Rap Assassin apparently does more damage, but in a completely inconsistent way that I don't know how I've never noticed before. But as far as its maximum critical damage versus a Fist of Steel Heavy, I got 97, 96, 104, and once 106. So maybe it's 106. Maybe it's higher, I don't know, but 106 is the highest I got. So that was all of Scout's weapons that can deal damage. And overall, the most possible damage Scout can deal is 396 in a very specific scenario with the Force of Nature. Well, at least when it comes to normal methods of attacking. There's actually something much higher, but I'm gonna save that for the end. For now, I want to take the opposite approach. What is the least possible damage Scout can do? And this time we'll work backwards, starting with melee weapons, cause I actually discovered something really interesting with the ranged weapons, and I'm not gonna spoil that yet. Obviously, you can't deal any damage to an Ubered player, or a Scout with Bonk or whatever, but, we're looking for the most resisted possible damage, so you actually have to be able to deal something. Kinda. But for the sake of this video, we're actually going to be looking at the second most resisted hit. And that's because the most resisted possible hit any class in TF2 can take is a spy with the Resistance Manpower power-up, who is also under the effects of a friendly soldier's battalion's backup, who also has a Vaccinator Medic Uber him, and activates his Dead Ringer at the same time. The resistance power-up reduces damage taken by 50%, the battalion's backup by 35%, the vaccinator to 75% of a selected type, and the dead ringer by 75% again for the feign. And yes, they do all stack. To test this, I went dead ringer spy, got the power-up, used a command to give me the battalion's backup effect, and had a vaccinator medic give me explosive resistance. And again, since grenades have a nice simple base damage of 100, it would make it very obvious how much less I was taking. So the grenade's damage was reduced from 100 to 25 with the dead ringer's feign, then brought down to 6.25 with the vaccinator, then reduced by half to 3.125 by the power-up, then reduced again all the way down to 2 damage by the battalion's backup. So you can effectively achieve 98% resistance with all of those factors. But there is one problem. That demo man doesn't see that he only does 2 damage. When you hit a dead ringer spy and they activate their feign, it doesn't actually show the reduced damage that you dealt, because if it did, that would pretty much just give away that the spy was using the dead ringer. So, while this is technically the most resistance you could possibly get, it doesn't really work well for demonstration purposes. Instead, we're just gonna focus on the least amount of damage Scout can do that he could actually see. And for melee weapons, that's simply just a heavy with the Brass Beast or the Natasha, who's under 150 health, who's also under the effects of the battalion's backup, and also has the resistance power-up. Okay, maybe that's not that simple, but it's more simple than the dead ringer spy. And rather than using a soldier every single time I did this, I just used a command to apply the battalion's backup effect to the heavy. So if you see the heavy kind of pulsing like that, that means he's taking 35% less damage, exactly the same way you would with the battalion's backup. Okay, the Stock Bat, the Sandman, the Candy Cane, and the Boston Basher all have their damage reduced from 35 to 9, the Sun on a Stick is reduced to 7, the Atomizer to 8, the Rap Assassin to 3, and the Fan of War to 2. This might take a while. So in the meantime, this video was sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes that's just about learning stuff. There's tons of different classes for things like illustration, graphic design, and even for how to properly lube your Rubik's Cube for competitive Rubik's Cubing. I didn't even know that was a thing. You see, I'm learning already. I forget how I even came across this class, but it was actually pretty interesting. I don't even know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, but let me tell you, next time I try, it's gonna be nice and smooth. Skillshare is made specifically for learning, with all sorts of new classes all the time, no ads, and it's less than $10 a month for the annual subscription. But the first 1,000 people to go to the link in the description will get a free trial of the premium membership. So go click it and go learn some stuff. Speaking of clicking, let's check back in on our Scout. Hey, he's finally finished. Now we get to move on to Scout's secondaries, which means we can now throw the Vaccinator and Fist of Steel into the mix. Scout's pistol has a base damage of 15, that's reduced to 7.5 at long range. It's reduced by 40% from the Fist of Steel down to 4.5, then halved by the resistance power-up, then reduced again by the battalion's backup to 1.4625. So with all that, the pistol is brought down to just 1 damage. But what's gonna happen if the Vaccinator medic ubers? That damage is cut by another 75%. This reduces the damage all the way down to 0.366. And up until making this video, I just kinda figured the lowest possible damage you could do was probably always rounded to 1. But no, you can actually deal 0 damage while still hitting someone. And I think that's super cool. I mean, how often would this ever come up? Something that's so resisted that it just rounds down to 0. That's really interesting, I think. And then just for curiosity's sake, I wanted to see how much the pistol would do up close with the Vaccinator Uber, and it does 1 whole damage. The Winger was the same with 1 damage up close and 0 from far away, but since the Flying Guillotine is considered untyped damage, it can't be resisted by the Vaccinator or the Fist of Steel, meaning only the resistance power-up and the battalion's backup affect it. And those two together reduced its base damage to 16 plus bleed. And if the pistol can be brought down to 0 damage, that means Scout's primaries can too if you only hit 1 pellet. At long range, a pellet from the scattergun will normally only deal 3 damage. So if you factor in all that resistance, yeah, it's not gonna do anything. And even with every pellet connecting, it only deals 6 damage. A close range meat shot from the scattergun is only dealing 6 damage. The Force Nature's lowest possible damage is of course also 0, but up close it deals a whopping 7 damage. The shortstop, also 0 from long range, but only 4 up close. And in case you were curious, like I was, the Dead Ringer will actually activate from a hit that deals 0 damage. As you can see here, I took no damage from that SMG, but still feigned my death. It's kinda unrelated, but still interesting. So back on topic, Scout's minimum possible damage in TF2 is 0 with any of his primary weapons or any of his pistols, and his max damage is 396 with the Force of Nature. Well, kinda. Just on its own, the Sandman's taunt kill has a base damage of 500. And I thought surely that would double to 1000 on a Fist of Steel Heavy, right? It's a melee weapon, so it should do double, but no, it's reduced to 300. Yeah, why is it resisted by the Fists of Steel if it's a melee weapon? And I came back to this because I figured it was probably considered a different type of damage. Probably bullet damage. And it would turn out that my assumptions were correct. With the Vaccinator bullet resistance shield, the Sandman's taunt kill only does 125. And with that Vaccinator shield on top of the Fist of Steel and the resistance power-up, it only deals 24. 24 damage from a taunt kill. I mean, that's less than the Sandman's base damage. And something else that's also kind of interesting is that the Atomizer's minus 15% damage penalty actually applies to the taunt kill as well, making it only deal 425 damage instead of the usual 500. So in that same scenario, the Atomizer's taunt kill will only deal 21 damage. And if that's the lowest Scout's taunt kill can do, now we gotta figure out the highest. So while the taunt kill damage may not be affected by crits, it is affected by mini crits and by the strength power-up and by the Warrior Spirit's vulnerability. So you add all that together to 1,755 damage, which is the highest possible damage Scout can deal to another player in TF2. This is another one of those video ideas that I came up with just by messing around and testing things just for fun. Kinda like exactly how Bugbusters started, and just like Bugbusters, I'm gonna definitely make this a series because I had a lot of fun making this video. Hopefully you guys found some enjoyment out of it. So just don't be too surprised if there's another damage video like this coming soon. I was actually considering making May a soldier-themed month, so there might be a video like this for Soldier next month. So stay tuned for that. And in addition to the sponsor of this video, I would also like to thank my patrons, like Varric, Captain Forex, Eggox, Dex, Zero Attention, Kybrid96, Probably Vinegar, and Grandpa Swood. And also a special thanks to Jacob for actually making the thumbnail of this video. But, alright. That's it for now. Until next time, peace out, dogs.